Everyone, welcome the CEO at Stack Overflow, Prashanth Chandrasekar.
Hello, everyone. Absolutely wonderful to be here. I just can't believe, I'm actually in Salt Lake City now, I think maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So just a tremendous ecosystem building here. Congrats to the Silicon Slopes board by Ryan and Aaron and all these other folks who have made this happen. Just amazing to see the energy here. So my name is Prashanth Chandrasekar. I'm the CEO of Stack Overflow. We're the world's largest software developer community and platform. Any software developers in the crowd here? All right. Any Stack Overflow users in the crowd? All right. Fantastic. Well, it's wonderful to be amongst our community. We wouldn't be here without you. So I hope this is a special moment to have you all here. So I'm here to talk to you about abstraction more broadly, and I'll talk about that word along the way, and ultimately the future in terms of the internet. So looking forward to sharing a few thoughts. So we're obviously in this very pivotal time. You heard Will talk about this on this in his previous conversation around generative AI and AI more broadly. It's sort of this tectonic shift that we're all embarked on, which I think is just absolutely tremendous. It's sort of a one-way door that we're entering into. But how did we get here to this point? And just let's start with a short history lesson, if you will. So all of you have been through this, probably, which is back in the early days, 1980s, personal computing. I remember getting my first personal computer. My dad got me one from Hong Kong, and it absolutely changed our perspective. There was no way to go back. The internet came through with the browser, the Netscape moment. We all remember that. There was no way going back after that moment. Same thing with smartphones in the mobile era, the iPhone moment. There was no way going back. And then, of course, Stack Overflow. We were founded in 2008 by a couple of amazing founders, Joel Spolsky and Jeff Atwood, and there was no way to write code other than using Stack Overflow. So there's like a pre and post Stack Overflow world. And similarly, cloud computing, and now ultimately with social networks, everything that Gary Vee talked about, and then now we're at this moment with AI, which is another one-way door that we're about to enter into. So let's talk about the impact of some of these tectonic shifts. So I showed you Stack Overflow was founded in 2008 during the last economic upheaval. And in 15 years, we have now aggregated 58 million questions and answers on the platform, all of which have been accessed 51 billion times by many people in this audience who are software developers, and well beyond, of course, around the world, right? Every possible country you can think of is represented on our community. Information is accessed very rapidly. 92% of developers use Stack Overflow on a regular basis, and that makes us one of the most popular websites in the world. So that's the sort of scale that you can get, and again, to allude to the earlier conversation by Gary, that you can get in these moments. And it's becoming cheaper and cheaper in some ways to get access to developers so that they can try out some amazing technologies to move the world forward. Now, with this open internet, the fact that we're in this moment is a tremendous tool for the good, but also there are plenty of challenges that it presents, right? So let's take a few examples. Obviously, it facilitates global communication. It's all about communication. Again, the earlier talks talked about that. And people around the world, you can instantaneously engage with them. If you just think about that for a second, 30 or 20 years ago even, that was not possible, right? It's absolutely instantaneous these days. Now, all that's really good, but with that comes the ability for various organizations and even governments to think about censorship and surveillance and all sorts of negative things that come out of that. So that's sort of the yin and yang effect. With enabled large information sets to be accessible to everybody around the world, whether that's through the browser, through Wikipedia, Reddit, or of course Stack Overflow, billions and billions of information components that are now accessed world around. That's the good part. The counteracting force now, of course, in these days is there's obviously the LLM world. There's massive amounts of data scraping happening so that you can actually produce LLMs, which obviously is not necessarily an ethical way to go about doing things without attribution, but that's the downside of the world we live in terms of open internet. In terms of fostering creativity and innovation, we heard about the ability now to just create businesses instantaneously. You can get instant distribution through what you have access to today with the internet. by just creating, whether you're a creator or you're an entrepreneur, you can get access to a lot of people. Of course, what does that mean? It's never really free. The cost of what we're doing there is actually when you've got personal information out there. So when you think about cybersecurity information, your personal data being compromised, that's the dark side of what that means. We've promoted economic growth through all of this. Massive amounts of wealth creation around the world. But there've definitely been the have and the have-nots. The richer have gotten richer, the poorer have actually not kept up. And this is true not just in developing countries, but also in developed countries. And finally, this has allowed us, through access to information, through many events through the past several years, that that we are able to use the open internet to protect values and human rights. But the downside of this is that people have also used to promote misinformation at mass scale. But AI, now that we're in this moment, we're at the center of this massive, massive shift. And all these social, political, cultural, economic things happening at the same time it's absolutely compounding. And so the heart of all these sort of changes ultimately lies in the hands of developers. Developers are the ones that decide ultimately where technology goes next. What they learn decides where technology goes next. And we see that literally on our platform, and I'm going to share a couple things with you on that topic. So we're obviously on this massive learning journey. AI is moving at a very rapid rate, and people are on this significant reskilling sort of mode. And so these tools are tremendous to get going, as Will was talking about, to write a piece of code that you can get very basic amounts of code going, and you can accelerate your development, and that's compelling. But the models that we actually have today are actually lacking in full levels of judgment. There are plenty of gaps. There are hallucinations, even 1 out of 20 times. When you're building something that's really, really important at a bank, you're building a system that could actually deal with people's money, as an example, do you want to risk hallucination? But generative AI still, it provides this phenomenal first draft, and then you have to take it to the next stage to be able to leverage it compellingly. So let's talk about the goal here, right? For you to be able to trust this in the context of really, really high-quality information for building compelling applications, we went and asked our developer community, 95,000 of them this past year, about AI. And 70% of them said that they absolutely wanted to use AI tools for software development. But only 42% of them said that they trusted what was coming out of generative AI models for software development. So there's a huge gap in people's intent to use it or excitement about using it and their ability to truly trust it for what they're actually doing on a daily basis. So that's a central theme as we thought about it at Stack Overflow, as I'll cover here in a second. We're also, as we talked about earlier, in the land of productivity. We are at this time where CFOs are absolutely trying to clamp down on costs, doing more with less, productivity, because of all the economic turbulence around the world. So it's all about making sure that we can actually be efficient with what we're doing. And it very much sort of translates in the context of companies and developers. So if you think about professional developers, when we ask them the same question, why would you want to use AI tools? What was the most compelling thing that allowed you to do this, or will allow you to do this? Is because it drives productivity up, it drives efficiency up, and allows them to learn really, really rapidly. If you're an early programmer, somebody who's just getting started, it's very similar metrics. They're just sort of in a different order. Learning, productivity, efficiency still come up to the top. So clearly, productivity is a central theme in this world, and in the context of AI, the reason why it's actually such a huge, it's a topic that meets the moment is because all these forces are coming together, innovation and productivity. There's also a lot of talk about, in the context of productivity, what is this going to do for jobs, right? There are a lot of doomsdayers out there saying this is the end of millions of jobs. So the question is that true? Should we be worried, either for ourselves, for our next generation? What does it mean? So we have a lot of data, especially around software development, about this topic. So if you look at the technologies on Stack Overflow for the past 15 years, this is the data from the past 15 years. We have seen it getting easier and easier to write software over the past decade and a half, right? When I wrote code many, many years ago, I never had Stack Overflow because it was before Stack Overflow. I would use a textbook and so on, and many of you probably remember that. But since then, it's gotten progressively easier because abstraction of software has happened. More and more frameworks have been created. More and more programming languages have been created. And it has truly gotten easier. So there were a lot of folks thinking, if it's easier to write code, what does that mean? Do you need that many software developers? And the reality is that the number of software developers have significantly increased during this time frame. And the bars in the orange are the history, and then the bars in the blue I'll speak to in a second in terms of what we expect. And during this period, by the way, this very long period between 2006 on this chart and now and beyond, we've had multiple massive moves, right? So if you think about the 2000 era, it was the outsourcing era. Jobs were being sent to other countries, technical jobs. I think at that point there were a lot of doomsdayers saying, you know what, that's the end of software developer jobs in the US, as an example. In the 2010 era, it was about automate all the things. It was about DevOps, and it is still about DevOps. But still, that's when there was a massive amount of momentum around the subject. And still people say, OK, if you're going to automate all things, then clearly you need fewer people to do this kind of work. But throughout all those periods, we only saw an increase in the number of developers around the world. And we think it's going to massively increase in the future. And why? Because we believe it's going to be a significant sort of virtuous cycle around AI and ML unlocking productivity, let's say within an existing company. Let's say you're working at a large company. That large company has to reinvent to be able to get closer to its customers, to integrate all the technologies we know about. AI, not only to mention that, but cloud and data sources to make sure you've got a foundation that you can actually rely on, and so on, and security postures, and so on. All those things lead to tech transformations. It leads to a startup ecosystem like the one we have here in Utah. And that creates a surge in demand for developers. And that's really why the self-reinforcing cycle happens. So we looked at all that, and at Stack Overflow, we asked ourselves, what can we do to actually drive the ball forward on AI, given what we actually have been doing for the past 15 years? So many months ago, we presented this topic of AI does some amazing things. It does summarizations, it does powerful search called semantic search, comparisons, and so on, all the things you've read about. But community, the humans in the loop, do some really compelling things as well. They create new knowledge. You need new knowledge, and you need new knowledge sources to be able to move the world forward. Validation of information, so you're not really relying on, maybe it's right, this black box answer. What about attribution? Things like that. Interpretation, and connecting the dots to use human judgment to make sure it's right, especially in critical situations. And so that led to our product principles that you see at the bottom: trust and attribution and citations and accuracy and quality and personalization, feedback and recognition, which is all part of the Stack Overflow ecosystem that all of you who are developers in the audience know about. So that was our vision that we laid out. And several months later, we announced what is known as Overflow AI at the We Are Developers conference in Berlin. And this is our generative AI capability that we have launched on our public platform on Stack Overflow, where tens of millions of developers access and search for knowledge on the platform. How do we have a conversational interface there, having generative AI answers that summarize and cite sources from the world's best JavaScript programmers and Python programmers and AWS experts, and to be able to do that not only on the public platform, but also within Stack Overflow for Teams, which is our SaaS product that companies, 15,000 companies like Microsoft and Bloomberg and SAP and all these big companies use within their organization's private Stack Overflow to share and collaborate knowledge. So all of that in different form factors, like now we can actually have Stack Overflow content being surfaced within the location where people actually write code, which is an IDE or integrated development environment called Visual Studio Code here. Or even within your Slack integration, where you actually have the right information from Stack Overflow, public and private, being generated right there as you are actually engaging in Slack. So imagine having all this at your fingertips, and you're able to go faster, innovate faster, be more productive. And we're abstracting away much of the complexity behind the scenes for even for you to even search, go to context switch. None of that exists. You're basically being fed wherever you are with the right information, accurate. You can audit it because there's effectively citations and so on. And you can rely on this to make a difference for you. And there are a couple other things mentioned here, like we are able to now use generative AI to really be able to not only search for content within your company through Stack Overflow public and private content, but also other documents that are relevant within your organization that we can connect up and summarize and generate answers. Or we can really supercharge community building by ingesting all this content within Stack Overflow, as an example, within your company. So really, really powerful capabilities, along with, of course, opportunities to learn about prompt engineering and generative AI more broadly on Stack Overflow, new spaces to do that. So we're very, very thrilled about this. Developers in the audience, if you would love to check it out, we'd love for you to provide your feedback. Please go to stackoverflow.co/labs, and you can go check out the alpha products that have been launched already. OK, thank you. We'll take the who. So we have, ultimately, we have to think about our roles as leaders within these organizations. And for us at Stack, we had this sort of important moment in November of 2022 when the ChatGPT moment happened. And we had to think about, OK, what does this mean for our companies? Right? And I'm only sharing this in the context of many of you will be likely thinking about this subject, not in the context of software development, but just if you're a company thinking about AI and what to do about it. These are some of our learnings. So I'll tell you a little bit about our story, and then I'll leave you with my sort of final points. So we immediately, our community of millions of developers, put a temporary ban on generative AI as soon as it came out. Why? Because we really value a high-quality knowledge base on public Stack Overflow. It's an accurate knowledge base. If this is hallucinating and mentioning wrong answers and populating that knowledge base, that's not going to work. So we banned it, the right decision at the time. We started seeing a lot of people going to ChatGPT to try out that instead of potentially using Stack Overflow on the public platform. So these rumors were sort of circulating. We ran an emerging tech survey in our developer survey that talked about the power of open source and abstraction and of course, AI more broadly. That came about. So then we very quickly brought together 10% of our company, sort of, red team, and really said, OK, we need to go build something around the subject. This is not a fad. It's here to stay. How do we leverage this power to solve real problems for our developers? Can we? We have plenty of problems that we can solve. How do we make it friendlier for people to engage on Stack Overflow? How do we not have a cold start issue when we introduce a new community of Stack Overflow for teams within companies, as an example? All these things that we've been tracking, which were historically not possible to be solved, now that we have the power of this technology, how do we go faster? So we did that. We then announced our community and AI vision that I showcased with that Venn diagram, the power of community and power of AI. And then we effectively started engaging with large companies like the big hyperscalers and others that really want to leverage our data, which is an extremely rich data set, to be able to train LLM models, not only their models, but we obviously have our own. So that's pretty powerful. And then we finally, to lead into our announcement, we sent our developer survey. 95,000 of you developers responded with what I shared earlier. 70% wanted to try out these tools, 40% trusted them. And then right after, in July of 2023, we announced Overflow AI at the VR Developers Conference. And it was received tremendously well. We've got tens of thousands of customers and users in our audience and our community who have signed up for our alpha products, and they're all testing them right now. And so we're super excited about the momentum we have. And of course, during this time, we're still battling traffic rumors. And then we ultimately launched these products in alphas, as I mentioned, and now we're off to the races. So just to sort of leave you with the kind of final set of, if you're a leader in the room, or if you're a team manager, you're probably going to be asked, OK, how does AI make a difference for you in your company? And the way I sort of approach this, or our leaders approach it within our company and myself, we said we absolutely need to be authentic when we think about this. How do we really make sure that we're solving real problems for our developers, put ourselves in their shoes? How do we make sure that we're inspiring folks on going through this next phase that's going to be absolutely different and dynamic and fast-changing? How do we make sure that we can connect the dots between what this movement is, which is somewhat larger than life? It's outside of our control to a degree. But how does it matter to what we do? Why are we here at work? How do we make sure that leaders are visible to make sure that you're not shying away from engaging your people? Because they're all wondering, how do you actually harness this or not harness it? How do you make sure that you keep, during what is likely going to be a fairly dynamic and tumultuous time, to make some decisions? How do you effectively make sure you're staying core to your values and you're staying inclusive with a lot of folks that are around the table, how do we make sure that you're absolutely focused on the most important thing in your company to move it forward? Because this is the time of productivity. You can't afford to do 15 things. We've had to be laser focused. We literally said, we will not work on anything except for this for the next 6 months, and that's it. And everything stopped. Only this was the focus. And that's what it takes to basically get stuff done in this era. And we were clear and proactive in our communication and decision making to say, here's why we're doing this, and we're going to keep this on hold, as an example. And we have to set the tone at the top. People who are running teams, you have to sense this, you have to drive it with a sense of urgency, because it's very much a race, right? So you think about it, so it's a very competitive game. So how do you make sure that you're actually setting the tone so your people are moving at that rate? Still being empathetic, being balanced. You have to be human, because we are leaders of people in many ways, so we want to make sure people love doing what they're doing and over-communicating what all the changes are, what they mean to your audience. So in this case, I have a second title other than CEO of Stack Overflow, which is Chief Repeat Officer of Stack Overflow, because I say the same things over and over again, and that's deliberate on my part. And then finally, of course, showing gratitude for the amazing amount of hard work that's going to be involved in this. This is not going to be simple for all of you and all of us to navigate, and it's going to be super important that we treat our people like people, and we can move the ball forward for our companies and our missions. So with that, you can connect with me directly anytime. I'm on LinkedIn or on Twitter, or you can just email me directly on Stack Overflow. So thank you so much. It's been wonderful.